Cool. So, last class though, everyone. This is great. And we've gone through getting to know the markets and harvest calendars, and like those are great things. And this class is kind of just like a teaser because I don't know, I don't have like the end all be all of like what's the secret to making our plans happen. But I have some strategies and wanting to talk about, yeah, specifically time management, and then a little bit about workplace culture too, and how we like approach that work. And um, so, yeah, as I'll go specifically, and we're going to go through some exercises on time blocking and just talk about how to prioritize our tasks. And I have a couple tools to help with that too. And those are in the class folders. But talking about you know, how we approach this work. And then as our teams grow and we're working with other people, how do we create a culture at a workplace and be part of a culture at a workplace? And that can get really complicated because people are complicated and it changes and it's dynamic and it hits home pretty close right about now for me. But done a lot of work to try and at least get on the same page in terms of like values and being kind to one another and how to have conversations regularly with check-ins and stuff. So we'll touch on that. But I did want to start on how we are coming to this work. Well, um, and I think I touched on this probably in one of our first classes. And I feel like I could even add more to this from my past week. But why are we going into farming and circling back on that? What is driving us to get inside? As I've learned, I feel like I've really tried hard to try and make farming a profitable career for myself and have experienced nonprofit farming and for profit farming. And the truth of the matter is, as it says, farming is a lifestyle, and the lifestyle is part of the remuneration. Remuneration, that's not a word. Remuneration that my business coach told me a few weeks ago. And it's an interesting thing to think of because like I think we all kind of romanticize to some extent this idea that like farming is can be like all of our income and be our everything. And it just really makes you have to ask and do the financials, which again, we aren't covering in this class, but I know next year we'll be doing some financial classes with Food Shed. So the very first step for that course is knowing your personal finances and knowing how much money that you need to be making and want to be making off of your farm. And it says a lot about kind of like how you approach the farm. Annalie, she would always say it's kind of just like if you don't have those sales, like that hustle, and just like something to kind of always like work towards. And it informs just like when you hit walls, like trying to be creative and thinking of solutions. Just today, I was listening to the Huberman podcast, and it was all about money and the psychological effect money has on our brain and our relationship to it. And it was saying that the generations that had the most innovation happen in America was the early 1930s after for the Great Depression, and then the 1940s during the next World War. Mm-hmm. And so during those times of like struggle and conflict, and you're hitting walls, that's when you start innovating and coming up with new ideas. But when we're like really comfortable and like things are going, just as they are, you kind of just like find your rhythm and routine. And so I just like thought of that to just really think of farming too as something that we've seen the model of the CSA farm and how that's changed. And now, you get it shipped to your house. You can change the items, every other week. It's all year round. There's like a lot of change that's happened with that CSA model. And, what other innovations are going to happen in our like small farm communities, because I think we are facing like challenges and struggles. And so I'm like curious to see where that shifts, and how we fit into it, because we have to make it work for ourselves. And there's an element when I'm talking about this too, and it comes to culture, it's like building the farm around our lives instead of like building our life around the farm. And so I see you thinking, Sienna, and I was going to ask too, just as a reflection for you all, like, what do you all hear when I say that? So building your life around the farm versus building the farm around your life.
I think someone had asked me this question before of like, even in thinking about building a farm, of kind of putting down your farm mission. And then also like, it's like on one paper you do that, and then on another piece of paper you put down like your mission. It's almost like the mission for your life, or just like, what do you want your life to look like? So it's like, what do you want
Mm-hmm.
your farm to be? What do you want the mission of your farm to be? And what do you want your life to look like? And then make sure that those like both of those missions have to align. Um, so I guess I think of that when you say that, because I think that it can be easy to, if it's like you want the farm to happen as it's supposed to happen, then you can just sacrifice all the things that you want in your life to do that. And then you get to a point where you're like, wait, is any of this
Yeah.
worth it? Am I even happy? Like,
Yeah.
what's the point kind of thing? And it kind of can take away from that aspect of farming as a lifestyle versus just like sacrificing the lifestyle piece for the business. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. That resonates.
Yeah, a few things came to mind. One, like your opening sentence here of like farming as a lifestyle, and the lifestyle is the part of the remuneration of the farm. If I like understand that correctly, it's like part of the value you're getting is like the lifestyle of farming. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And like more than any other job I've had, I feel that way about farming right at this moment in my life, where it's like I've never had such a blurred line of
Mm.
my work and other aspects of like my life, like friendships, community, sense of belonging, like physical movement, exercise, and like spirituality, emotional, like regulatory, like everything is so embedded in my work. And I think I've shared this with both of you, I think at different points over the last few months of like almost feeling weary or cautious about that, of like this fear of putting too many things about my well-being and sense of like purpose and income, like all into this one basket,
Mm.
but also like really loving that and not being really interested in doing anything else, and just feeling so
Yes.
lucky that wow, the my workplace where I am spending so many hours of my life and energy is going into something that I like really love and that's bringing me benefits beyond a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
But then this idea of like innovation coming from like tough times and struggle, and thinking about like the income of a farm and profitability. Like, what's that line when the hustle mentality like starts to get old and like not innovative, and you just feel tired and tired of hearing like you're not making enough money, or tired of being like stressed yourself for your own like financial well-being, or
Yeah.
like people you have to pay on your team. Um, and so yeah, I feel like it's just so integrated and like layered then.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for speaking to that last piece, especially just the pressures, being told like you need to make more, and then you're driven. So it's like it's that why. So it's like if the farming is meant to be a way for us to like feed our families and pay our rent, then like it changes things. And then we hustle and we make sacrifices, and then we sacrifice some of those personal missions and values, as you were saying, Hannah, to like meet that goal of like having the farm and having the income. Um, but then it jives further and further away from like that lifestyle value. In that why. And so I feel like I'm very much in that, point where at Be Worthy, just like being so successful and like hitting the markets and just like feeling good, making sales, and then like making a lot of sales and maxing out myself and my team, and recognizing like, oh, whoa, like we've been like hustling because August comes. It's like the August September burnout thing. It's like common everywhere, especially more, I feel like, in the hotter parts of the country. But I mean, no, we're hot. More of the seasons, places where there's winter, I should say, the colder parts. Because those days are like 14-hour days, I feel like, in their summer months. Yeah, I guess and it comes back to our why. I mean, we're the ones doing it. And so for me to build a farm around what I'm doing, it brings up the thing of like, how much income do I need to be making from the farm, or having other off-farm incomes. And I know where there's teams of people, where there's bigger farms that have you actually really got to pay staff like legal labor wages and stuff, and like overtime. And there's several farms in the area that have like bigger teams. Like they all struggle with how do you actually like pay somebody their full labor hours versus when it's your own business. You can kind of say, oh, yeah, I'm going to work like 30 hours, but I'm only going to pay myself for like 10 of those. Or I'm going to pay myself like minimum wage, but I don't know. Minimum wage in California is still, in San Diego is still very, very high, So they're complicated issues, but I did just kind of want to like bring it up because I just have it's the same conversation, like with every farmer and every farm organization. It's like, how do we make the money to like support ourselves? And until we as like a culture and ourselves can like really value that aspects of, just the community connection, like the spiritual healing that happens on the land, then, if it's just about numbers, we're missing a huge part of it. And so, but then there's a reality of we need to pay rent. And but that's where I like this innovation thing, because in my mind I'm just like, there's just another way to think about it. There's another way to bring community together. Like I love thinking of agritourism and just how people can engage on the farm through that, or through education or internships and apprenticeships, like finding these other pathways to make it work, and have it be even more meaningful and more in depth and more spiritual, like kind of almost like leaning into those elements of it, so that the pressure for making money isn't solely on the products, like one kohlrabi or a bunch of flowers. It's a lot of pressure to put on us because we can get as efficient as we possibly can, and like it's still, the numbers still won't make sense. As it's just the reality of competition on the open market with other farm products coming from all over the world. So yeah. So I'm gonna like, I guess that's this is the start of it, just the why. And I don't know if either of you have anything else to add to the conversation, as I think of a transition into the actual tools of time management.
I think you kind of spoke to what I was gonna ask of like, do you know of any profitable farms that are like just selling their produce or something like that aren't doing events really? Because I feel like I haven't seen it or heard of it, and it seems like the only viable way to like really get a higher revenue is through agritourism or events. And just yeah, we're so disconnected from, I think, the true cost of food. I one of your classes, Kat, inspired me to like I picked carrots and
Mm.
I I didn't finish, but I was trying to um what's the word? I guess monetize like every aspect of
Uh,
like from the carrot seed that we buy to the time it takes to seed and the amendments in the bed and like all of the labor
oh yeah, yeah,
cost and all of the inputs as much as I could figure out. And like, I think it would just be so interesting to make a diagram for for ourselves and consumers to be like, this is the what it like actually costs to produce
yeah,
this bundle of carrots, and this is what we sell it at because this is what people are used to. But like, it's not. It's not like we're really making money.
yeah. That's the Know Your Cost to Grow class, where she has all those spreadsheets. And I mean, it is helpful because you can find where can we optimize costs, and efficiencies, and like have those conversations of like, oh, maybe we shouldn't seed carrots by hand. We should use, a Jang seeder versus an Earthway seeder, which we're gonna have to come back in, So like, there's certain technologies out there that help inform us, which goes to that second point on this slide here is like, what cash investment do you make into some of these like on-farm equipment and processes. um, how do you build your beds? And I mean, when you start looking at those machines that can like harvest carrots out in the field and they're just like like chains of carrots, and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm like out there with a fork digging them up. It's like, how can you even begin to compete with that? So the value has to be somewhere else.
Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah, and it's like our time is what's valued. Here we go into the transition. Our time. Was there anything else though, Hannah, Sienna? You good? Pop on. Yeah, yeah. And so yeah, one of our most valuable inputs in here is our time, and we become more and more efficient with our time. And how do we go about thinking about that? There's like two elements of time, and there's time blocking is a we're going to go into that, and I have some mirror board exercises which I'm really excited for because I did it for myself in preparation for this, and I was like, wow, I just feel so much better. My mind's cleaner. I know I don't have to think about X and Y tasks because there's a place for it now, and like it's scheduled and on the calendar. And like figuring out what those tasks are, is like it takes like a level of awareness. I guess there's like an introductory piece of this that maybe I missed when I was thinking about it, but it's something that's become second nature to me because when I worked at the water board forever ago, I took this prioritization class and they had us just do a log for the whole week. And so we're measuring down to the 15 minutes, like what we're doing and how we're feeling about it, so that we can see within our day when do we feel the best and have the most energy. And so, for me personally, and I guess it goes to, we're talking before we started the recording about when's the best time to have this class, and it's everyone's different. I'm like, maybe we're all showing up because we're all like this. I'm good in the evenings. I can just be focused. I get so efficient, and like creativity and like productivity just marry themselves really, really well for me at this like evening hour. But like after lunch, I'm like a wet noodle. I can't think. I just want to like sit and hang out. And so kind of tracking our energy cycles through the day. So when we are the wet noodles, like after lunch for me, that is not the time for me to develop my marketing strategy. I'm like not at 100%. That's the time that I am, washing the buckets, washing the crates. It's the time I'm like organizing and putting stuff away. And so I've kind of uh, structured my time now for my highest priority tasks. I can do those very first thing in the morning. So, like when I wake up, like I am sharp at 6 a.m. Like that's just me. I'm really sharp first thing in the morning. And I'm also sharp like later in this evening hours. And so late afternoon. So, my most important tasks, I'm trying to think of like when I'm doing those ones that I need the most focus and I'm doing them then. And then you kind of have like that's your A tasks, and then your B tasks are the ones that are more require a lot of time, but maybe not just like the mental energy. And then your C tasks are just those mindless wet noodle tasks. And so for you all, and maybe I'll find that exercise somewhere and see if I can like add it into our resource folder, because that was fun. So yeah, that's just like kind of part of how I like think about my days and stuff. So when I'm thinking of those farm tasks specifically, it's like, where do they fall kind of like on this chart? And so this is a chart we're going to look at now and then kind of look at again in this like the delegation matrix. But it's kind of like the urgency. How big of the fire is it versus like the importance? And so noting that there's like these, I love the just anything that's urgent, like the fires, they just like always call your attention, right? But the low urgency ones seem to always kind of like get just like kicked off. The things that are just like always put on the back burner, and just like, what's always been put on the back burner is like entering harvest data into Tend, which is the crop planning software. And so it's like, okay, it's not urgent. It's really the least important thing. And so this chart tells me to like, just remove that, delete it, like stop having it on your task list as something you got to do kind of thing. But I really, really enjoy this high importance, low urgency thing, because these are the tasks that I think the farmers, us as farmers, really ignore. Gopher in the carrot patch, very high urgency, high important. Like so many things fall into this like top right corner, like, oh, you just got to do it, you just got to do it. And so and then oftentimes in this lower right one, if we're like a solo farmer, we can't really delegate, so we're having to do it ourselves. But this is a really important field for, I'm looking at both of you on big teams, and I feel like Sienna, we had this conversation before too, of like, how do we get the kale consistently bunched, right? It's like high urgency, the kale needs to get in and it's got to be done well. It maybe isn't as important. There's a little bit of wiggle room on like the quality, and it's how do we overcome that urge to just like do it ourselves versus like really delegating some of those things out. Other tasks that like, so it's like getting that quality up to standard is, it's important, but I feel like local food customers are a little bit more resilient. So they have a wider berth, a forgiveness. But other things like this is fertigation, fertilizing. For me personally, falls under this like, it's very urgent and important that happens regularly, but it kind of feels low importance to me. And so what are the other ones? For some reason, and this is different for everybody, like greenhouse seedings need to happen at a certain time, but in my mind, they are just way less urgent than the other things, or less important than the other things on my list. And so, and even harvest to some extent, like, I don't know, it's just a personal thing. When I was chatting with JJ, my former employee, just about like, oh, these things I would totally delegate to you. They're just like tasks that are like urgent, and have to happen to make the farm function. But for me, it's just like low importance. And then I guess that goes back into how we started talking too, like what's your why and what brings you into this, and how do you address those pieces? It's also just bringing to, when Hannah and I were talking about the importance of being, when you're the boss and you're running the things, you can't give up sales. That's not something you delegate. something you do yourself, but there's a lot of other important admin tasks that like you as the owner or as a manager, that's like your important thing. It's high importance, low urgency kind of stuff. And so these two tasks are interesting, right? Because when we really need to be doing this stuff, and we're going to talk about scheduling and where to put those, like delegating these other tasks and um like I'm not going to delegate bed prep for me. It's also one of those equally urgent things, but that's like what I love to do. And so for somebody else, it might be, I don't want to do bed prep or I don't want to do planting, and so that's a great one to delegate. There's so many tasks that can fall into this delegating square. And I think with farming in general, I think we should all really be thinking of it as like a team sport or like having a team of people because farming alone, I don't even, I think, I did it for a bit at Farm Lab when I first started working for the Ecology Center. I was like, they're all alone. And yeah, I just remember like crying alone a lot in the fields. It's just like,
So much to do alone.
yeah, so much. And like when those hits hit you, man, it's just like not having someone to like commiserate with is challenging. So yeah, I kind of want to encourage, that's not everybody's thing, but if like you're really coming into this to like think of farming as a career or a pathway, it's that's what we're talking about culture too. Later on, it's like a teamwork thing. And so even what we're doing up in Encinitas too, of having the every other week farmer luncheons and or a month, and how are we all staying in touch and in community so that we are not alone. And so like prioritizing stuff like that, super important. Is high importance, low urgency. That's why we schedule it and just put it on the calendar, everybody. They just show up there. And so this is a field that has really made a big difference in our business. And I'm going to visualize this a little different. Any questions on this little matrix here? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So this delegation matrix, this is looking at what we just looked at, just a little different because this was recommended by another coach. And so this is a resource in the folder. And so just wanting to show a little bit different way of thinking about this is, and I was alluding to it as we were talking about that. Here's our, so that one was like urgency and importance. And this matrix is like amount of time you spend on it and like how much you love it or hate it. And so we can also be, this has a little exercise. I don't want to make for the sake of making you all very sick as I scroll. This isn't specific for farming, but I love seeing just like, oh, all the administrative tasks and revenue generating stuff. So this just helps you show how much work and how many hats we have as a farmer. It's like we have to do all of this plus all the farming things, which aren't even included on this list, So it's a lot of different things. So just wanting to tie this back into what I chatted earlier about, like, when are we thriving? What feels the best for us? When do we feel our best? And what tasks are we doing when we're doing those things? So getting that level of like awareness. I'm like just a social person. I know you all too. Both of you all are like, you like community and being in community. And so, having part of your job be a leadership role or managing or supervising somebody rather than being the one that's going to be alone in the greenhouse. But like, I guarantee you every farm I've like seen, there's somebody that's like, sign me up for that greenhouse job. And all I do is get to be by myself in the greenhouse with my music. And they are super happy. And so I always love greenhouse managers because they're so rooted into who they are. So a lot of this work is knowing who we are, and there's definitely elements of stuff that we have to do that maybe we don't like. but wanting to make sure that at least half of our time is spent doing something for the farm that we love. And so, fortunately for me, and I know Hannah and I were talking, it's like I actually really enjoy a lot of the admin stuff. I love running the books. I love thinking about my markets, doing the business admin. And I think a lot of other farmers, would enjoy that too. As soon as you get the confidence in a skill and now you have agency, like it becomes a, more energy loving versus an energy hating. And so if anyone's fine doing this exercise and finding that, like, essential elements are happening in the hate level, um, maybe finding a way to learn it so you can love it, like taking a course, getting a business coach, because not everything you can really delegate. Bookkeeping you can delegate, but like marketing to some extent you can delegate. But from what I've heard is like it's important to have, the owner's voice or the manager's voice be the one that's like speaking through on social medias and email marketing. So um, yeah, it can just be like really hard if all you're doing is admin stuff and you're like, wait, I thought I wanted to do farming. That's just the common thing that happens. People saying, like, get into farming and you're running a business. So, um, yeah. And then just this like more time spent, less time spent. This is again, remember in the other one, which was like urgent and important, it's like you just do it. And same with this. If you don't have to spend a lot of time on it and like it's something you love doing, just do it, and like finding those times. And so um, something recently I embarked on is when I look at my emails, I do my emails kind of thing. And it's like it's something that takes just like 5 minutes, to respond to a message, but just do those things. Don't let them linger. Yeah, and trying to see some of those other pieces on the farm. Ooh, this is a good discussion question. One of my one of my old favorite things I would say is like the best skill you can have on a farm is to see something that needs to get done and just walk on by it. And that's there's just so many things to do, but that's caveated, right? So there's certain things that I'm like, even though I'm harvesting, if I see a ginormous leak that's dumping like tons of water, like I'm going to stop what I'm doing, go get a coupler and fix that. There's certain things like pinching for flowers, like you have to pinch them when they get a certain height. And if you do it too high, it messes. Like if they've already grown so much, it warts everything. So if I'm ever out in a field and I'm like, those flowers need to be pinched, I'm doing that right then. It's 10 minutes. So fixing row cover that blew off. Like I'm fixing that as soon as I see it because I know those rabbits are going to find their way in. So those are some things that I will always, when I see it, I'll do it. And that goes for me too, though I have a different management approach than my old partner where, I am always seeing things when I'm walking around or when I'm harvesting. I'm like observing, observing, observing. And like her approach was to like not see anything and only go and see things on her farm walks. Similar to my email thing, right? So I'm like, if I look at my email, I'm going to do my emails. And that's kind of her thing. It's like, I'm going to go on the farm walk and I'm going to do the farm walk and I'm going to schedule it all out. And that's like, her approach to farming, which, just was different than mine, where I'm like always looking and I'm going to, systematize and uh, do and delegate in my own way. And so I'm curious just to hear from you all if there's anything like that. When you see it, you just got to do it, or versus that like, and we're going to get into it, the farm walk and prioritization thing, because that evolves into that conversation. Anything you see that you attend to right away, or do you pretend like it's not there?
Feel like this is something I like constantly battle every day, and I feel like I've witnessed Greg battle it a lot as well, because I mean, everywhere you look, there's always something.
Yeah.
And it's like every day there's new things. And I was recently like reflecting on the way I like literally walk around the farm too. You see different
Mm.
things because normally I'll do like an up and back down the middle because it's just like fastest, but actually like walking into the beds or like walking on the other side, you like notice different things. And then it's also like the I guess the scale of your site of your farm walk too is like,
Mm.
are you staying in the roads? Are you going within the beds? And then are you like bending down and like feeling the soil or looking at the leaves
Yeah.
and noticing the pests or the water? Or are you just like, oh, this bed like needs to be flipped or cleared or it's like different levels, I feel like. And
Yeah. Uh-huh.
so I think for me, like a big thing is just the time I have in that moment to walk. I really like coming early before anyone gets there so that I know I'm gonna have like uninterrupted time to walk and take my notes. And I've been making I just do like a simple grid in my notebook every week basically
Mm-hmm.
and write out like everything I can think of that I'm noticing that needs to be done, whether it's weeding or harvesting or transplanting or flipping. And then that helps me like for either that day or the week, be able to then like put it on our whiteboard and think about priorities and like delegating to the team.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't really answer your original question of terms of like what I need to do right away. But I mean, definitely leaks. I feel like those are things. But I guess what I'm trying to say is like what I've noticed partly with having a team is when you're in like a leadership role, you can't just like you're going to be seeing things all the time and you can't just go and do them because you need to make sure that a team is like busy and knowing what they're supposed to be doing and feel
Yeah.
equipped to do that. And if you're just like doing everything, it you're not available to do that and it's not productive anyway because you can't do everything alone. So
Yeah.
I think my thought process is like identifying all the things, then delegating, and then figuring out like what makes sense for me to do, let's say on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I feel like watering is something I do right away where I'm like, oh, this is dry. Um, and either like hand watering or turning sprinklers on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like hearing that too, kind of element of like, I would say too, that's one of your powerhouse strengths too, Sienna, is like being present for your team and like, you know, that's really strong. It's like some other farms you can go to. It's like that farm manager is like, yep, go do this. And then they are off doing all those other little tasks. So finding that balance of like being present with your team, because it's really, really important to building a cohesive team and also giving yourself those time for those other little tasks that maybe only you know how to do. And then you start getting into this element too of like, I find a lot of farmers um, having labor stick around for a long time is really challenging. And so to spend the time and train somebody on how to do all the things and really make that effort only for them to leave, and you're like, oh man, that person was going to be the one to be able to go fix leaks or go for trap or these other things,
Mhm.
but now they're gone. And so I think adapting to I'm trying to personally adapt to what the reality of the labor situation like is like in San Diego and like working around that.
Yeah.
I guess as a small business owner too, it's more likely. Whereas like if you have a well-paying job that's more stable, that can afford you to like live in an area, then your labor may stick around for
Yeah.
multiple seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, the do, delegate. Yeah, that's this other nexus then, the do and delegate nexus. And just like finding those key folks. Yeah, and so that's, I mean, that just brings me into this like time blocking thing of how can I like at least structure my time to make sure there's like room for all the things. And if I do have somebody come in, it's really clear what those tasks are that I'm going to have them do, and that I'm like separating it out. So I think, oh, I like copy paste this. This is actually already in our the same team. We have I have the mirror board from before. What was that? Oh, we did the market stream pros and cons list. Here we go. Here's my my week thing. Pretty stoked on it. So I mean, when I first did this, I had this on pieces of paper and was moving it around. And then I'm like, oh, I can do that on mirror board. So I'm really excited that this is here. When I first did it too, I didn't put admin tasks in. I only put in farm tasks, and that was a big mistake. And so one, I'm not going to pass on to you all. So the admin unseen work time. Um, what I mean, this is like what I love about this is like these, I color coded them. So these pieces in red for me are the non-important. They're important and they're urgent, but like in my world, they aren't as important. And so these red ones, pest management, so that's gopher trapping, spraying for aphids, soapy water for aphids, any kind of backpack spraying or side dressing for fertility, and for whatever reason, greenhouse seeding. Even though I love greenhouse seeding, but it's so like tedious and slow that like I have a hard time slowing down because my mind's all like, I gotta be over here. So giving myself the time to do greenhouse seeding would probably be a gift. But when we first were doing this, it was like I get to make a conscious decision, in this time. It's like, what is the most important things that I have to do on the farm? And like, let me plug those in and then backtracking with other pieces. And so the way I've been thinking about it is like, it's like a squeeze. I'm like squeezing in from the both sides. So like good soil health and like pest prevention and fertility is like a foundation that I'm like, these things are going in. It's a whole Friday morning. It's like, maybe every other week I'm doing greenhouse seeding, and on the other week I'm doing fertility and I'm backpack spraying. And so I've adjusted our seeding schedule to be every other week rather than every week, which is what it was before. And so for other folks, I know they seed only on a certain lunar phase. And so they're only doing it like once a month. Um, and they're like, and everything just works out because seeds actually do better when they're planted on certain lunar dates, like right before the full moon. So that's a fun thing to look at. There's pieces like your harvest that like have to happen. And so that's squeezing on the other side. So I have the foundation, soil health, pest management, the babies are all getting going. And I want to plant that crop plan that I planned for. And I'd rather have the throw away the greenhouse seedings, like the seedlings, than not have them to plant, like have the bed space and have nothing to plant. So staying on top of greenhouse seeding. And then on the other end, I'm making sure there's sales happening and harvest happening. So I have harvest, and this admin time specifically is actually my sales time is on Wednesday afternoons. So I'm like squeezing in. And so now, okay, I'm squeezing in. And if, harvest runs over, I have to make a conscious decision. Okay, I'm doing that on Tuesday too, or I'm doing it on Thursday. And what are these tasks that are going to get squeezed out? Because, like, you can see on Tuesday, I'm all things bed prep, clearing, amending, and shaping, and often for me, it's like we're clearing on one day, a week, and then the other week we're doing all the amending and shaping. And so I alternate in that way. So similar on the greenhouse seeding fertility. It's because that kind of works out. So I don't plant every week always. Sometimes it's only, these two morning windows are rotating for me. So planting and bed prep, and they kind of happen. There's like three. I chunk it in my head as, we're all clearing beds, and that's like one effort, because if I'm trying to clear a bed, amend it, shape it, and plant it all in the same day, those are all different sets of tools. And as you switch a task, you lose efficiency and you lose focus. And so I would rather just be going and clearing like a shit ton of beds at once, or mending a ton of beds at once, rather than have my team, oh, you're going to put those tools away. Oh, we're going to go and grab some compost. And they're walking all the way in, they're walking all the way back. But as they went in, they checked their phone, or they got this. And like, you just like lose focus and attention. And yes, breaks are essential and required, of course, but there is like that extra time, and just like the mind switching and having to make decisions. And specifically with planting, all I want to do is planting on that day, because it does require us like focus and, a completion that's needed for planting. Like if I can't cover those plants, I'm not, why'd you plant them if you can't like cover them, if the crows are just gonna, yeah, maybe I should cover my ranunculus. They go in and they like dig up and they just like pull the ranunculus corms out. They're just like, oh, where's a worm? Let me get this plant out of the way so I can like get the worms. It's just like, ah. But it's like I have to cover them.
Or
So,
watering. I feel that with
yeah. And
like
so
direct seeding all these beds, and then I always underestimate how long it takes to like hand water at the end of the day, and it's like dark and we're watering.
yeah, hopefully you have a good hose. I like helped hand water for Farm Lab, and I was like a quarter of the way down the bed, and I had to do two beds, and I was like, this hose sprayer nozzle is awful. I was like, it is going to be quicker for me to go all the way across the farm to get my nice nozzle, and come back than to keep watering with how long it's going to take to water the beds with this terrible nozzle. Tying it back into joy versus drudgery versus investments in your equipment, So it's like trying to get some of these tasks quicker or more joyful that's important. Maybe it's like you're like hand watering, make sure I have a little checklist. This is what I bring out to the field. And maybe you have your little hose popper, that like quick coupler you showed me. That was
Mhm.
cool. It's like, oh yeah, that always comes out with the planting tools, and I set it up first. And so it's the very first thing I do is I bring hoops out and row cover out. So before I even plant, I have that row cover and stuff all ready to go. Because yeah, there's such a sense of completion. You're like, yes, finished planting. You're like, done. And you're like, dang it, so not done. It's really not
Yeah.
done at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
I will say, like, that's something that Emily and I started doing is the day before we have a planting, we make sure that we have whatever we're needing to cover the plants and like all the weights just at least
Mm,
like over there. And it's been a game changer. Like
yeah.
it, even just knowing that it's already there is so relieving, and it feels like less of you're like, okay, I did the planting, then you're like, oh my, I have to hoop and I have to cover and like
Yeah.
have on. And so when it's just there, yeah, it's so much easier and it's just better. And yeah,
Which
it's
is
awful.
it's fascinating, right? It's like literally probably the same amount of time.
I know.
But like once you're finished planting, it's like, oh, drudgery. But when it's something you're doing like ahead of time, and it's like, yeah, you're just like, oh yeah, we're done with harvesting. Yeah, these little time blocks I have, weeding and trellising here in the early afternoons. It's like, oh, that's when I have like an hour, hour and a half. Like, what am I going to be doing with that time? It's like, oh, it's a great time to prep for the day before, um, or do the little trellising tasks, you know. Weeding's pretty light on our farm. Not in field 3 there for you all, Hannah. Oh my gosh. That was insane, the level
That's
of
all we
weeds.
did all day today was we weeded field 3.
And yesterday you were in there too. So wild. How's your weed load, Sienna, at on the farm?
It's okay. I don't think it's terrible. Like we've gotten away with not weeding
Yeah.
every week. Yeah, we really haven't had like I'm like nervous saying all of this out loud.
Like, where's the wood to knock on? Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like I've been at other like I can remember Farm Lab, the crabgrass or the Bermuda grass that just had
Yeah.
like taken, and it feels like you're never gonna get rid of it, and we haven't really had anything that bad. Um, yeah, we we've had a few like carrot beds when they're young that have a lot of weeds popping up. So I'd say that's the most tedious when it has to be done like by hand between like baby carrots. But yeah, the hula hos are great usually and
Yeah.
yeah.
Weed flushing ahead of planting. Those are, yeah, they're little strategies that kind of loop into like bed prep. It's so dependent on the farm.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
definitely it's like, oh, we did not weed enough before or the yeah, that the seeds were like maybe dormant in the bed and then they popped up and so
The winter rains are coming and you're just like, all right, here we
yeah,
go.
that's true too. It'll be
I had a huge leak in the wobblers system and it ran for way too long. And now this like the back part of the field, you're just like, oh, it's like solid with it's like the burr clover and grasses. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, it's just like thick in the
mm,
edges of the field. So yeah, weed whacking. Because I just know at Ecology Center, they would put weeding like literally they just do it 15 minutes every day. It was their wet noodle task. It's like right after lunch, they just like went and they would just grab their collinear hoe or hula hoe and just spend 15 minutes
yeah.
just on whatever, and they'd rotate around the farm and
Yeah.
pop on the weeding. And that was just like how they time blocked for that. So
I do like that too because it's also a task then that like it's minimal explanation or deli like it's just something everyone knows immediately like that's what you do for X number of
yeah.
time and it like gets you moving. Um
Oh, that just reminds me too of just we had AM chores at Wild Willow, and it's kind of that right after lunch thing. And so notice how I have like admin tasks 30 minutes here, just like I just sometimes need 10 minutes here to like put a social media post up, or I need to get back to these emails over here, or I just need to like print out these spreadsheets and like make sure they are where they need to be. And they're these really short tasks. And so at Wild Willow, we'd have AM chores. So when people came in, they just knew the first thing they did was go feed the animals, change the water. Or one person was doing gophers, other people were watering the fields. And if anybody got done early, everyone would go and help do the trapping kind of thing. And then that gave me the buffer to be able to be like, okay, what's the task for the day? Like, what are these other things I have to take care of? So that way I'm not having to do that, like, oh, prep for the day ahead, like the night before I go into work. So that way I can really have a delineated time of like, no, I'm done at this time kind of thing, or I
yeah.
don't have to be doing work outside of these hours. So that's AM chores is a great way to, or right after lunch chores, it's a great way to carve out some, a manager task time.
Like that.
Oh, and what do you notice also on the calendar right here? Self-care.
What's that?
So noting, that often we have to like literally put it on our calendars. Um, I found like this Wednesday afternoon yoga class, and so I only did it once. But I put it on my calendar and it just like became a thing where it was like, that was Chris's dinner night. And so I just knew dinner was going to be made for me. And I put it on my calendar, the yoga class. And like, former me before I did that was like, oh, great, Chris is making dinner. I can work until 8 p.m. now, and it's like, no, I'm going to use this time to stretch. I'm going to use it to meditate. I'm going to use it to call a friend. I might not always be yoga, but it's like scheduled on my mind now that like this time is for me. It's for me to recalibrate and for me to be okay. And also notice too, it's like there's a weekend with like, I'm allowing myself some record keeping. That's my QuickBooks time. I know I shouldn't be doing QuickBooks as I'm trying to do other things. So I need to do it, at another time. But really trying to make sure that we're not scheduling things for every single minute of the time. It's really important. Let me hear you repeat it, everybody. I'm going to schedule self-care time into my calendar. I'll take those smiles as agreement.
Is this your cat's calendar or is this for the team or both?
This is one that, well, I mean, my schedule's shifting. It was like before we had Thursday design day, and so I'm kind of trying to workshop ideas for next year and taking design off. And so I'm trialing out this like florist in residency program so that I'm partnering with a florist to like do designing so that I don't have to and no one on my paid team does. And it's kind of just something that happens outside of the business. And like I'm like, whoa, what does that mean when I can have this whole Thursday back now, It's pretty huge because before it was like design here. And so I had literally, whoopsies, only Tuesday mornings to do bed prep and planting, in any farm task. I only had like a Tuesday morning to do that. So that was like, it was way too much pressure. And then it's like harvest, harvest, harvest all the things. But it is mine too because you can kind of notice a theme of my afternoons being admin tasks. Um, this one we'll actually see in the next version, like really Tuesday afternoon. I'm planning to be this like really heavy brainstorming and planning day. There's a lot of my astrological woo-woo-ness here, but like Tuesday is like, I think it's the day of Jupiter. It's ruled by Jupiter. And it's like a day for like abundance. No coincidence that this class is happening on Tuesday. But it's like Tuesday is a day for just like aligning with, yeah, having really good things manifest. And so I like to do those kind of important things on Tuesday afternoon in my prime time. So um, Friday's like a fun, Venus, it's just like ruled by Venus, it's like love and community. And so it's just like when I used to have a Flower Power Friday, remember that, Sienna? Or Fierce Female Farming Friday, I think I called it. And it's like, even to this day, it's just like, it's these important, like not important things, at least in my mind, that I'm doing. And like Friday mornings, it's the one day, if we really as a team need to go grab coffee, let's go do it on Friday morning. It's like the Fridays are like a fun day that have a bit of flexibility built into them because of the nature of the day, just like the vibe of the day. Who was I talking to just about like, it was Shannon that we love a Tuesday through Saturday schedule because trying to actually rest and rejuvenate on a Saturday, just like it doesn't work, and for us as like our people types. And so I'm like, I'd rather be working on Saturday, doing community engagement and all these fun things through my work. And then Sunday is actually a day of rest. And then when everybody else is stressed, like there's like a global consciousness here, like going back to work on Monday. And when I get to just like, I don't have to go to work on Monday. Oh my gosh, like I have so much more rest when I don't have to get up and go on Monday mornings. And so right now I'd have to because I'm taking over some things, but I'm like, oh, I'd love to switch. Can I move harvest to Tuesdays, this one to Thursdays? So um, yeah, this can look many different ways. And it probably changes by the season too. So um, did want to pull out the monthly planner too. Just this is
Oh, so
a version that I, just kind of put together because I was finding all my admin tasks. I was having a really hard time managing them and thinking of where they fit. And so, and I have an off farm job, the county job. And so I'm like looking like, okay, how can I shift my county job and still work there? And I was like, oh, okay, I can fit it into Monday and Wednesday afternoons. So I'm just going to reduce my hours and work those 2 days. And, you know, where did you go? Monthly. Oh, it is here. Yeah. So my Tuesday afternoons. So just like every Tuesday afternoon, it's not the same, but the first one, I'm doing my monthly capture. I'm just checking in on my finances, my sales, how's my team? Like I'm taking that time to like just evaluate how get the pulse of the business. And I'm looking into my reports, I'm running reports, who's engaging on here and whatnot. So that's my first Tuesday of the month. The second one, and this is a new one, is like allowing myself room to brainstorm and have new ideas. And so, whether it's me doing like a Qigong class or like taking another class or, allowing myself to have creativity to think of new ideas. We'll see how this goes. This like marketing planning. So, spending one of those afternoons really diving into my marketing plan. And then this was inspired by Julie at Farm Lab, was this like regular procurement. So instead of trying to do procurement as an on needed basis, like once I want to do once a month, she's once a quarter, but really looking and being like, oh, okay, what are the things we needed? Oh, okay, we need more gopher traps and propagation, and I have time. Can go and run around and do those errands. And so carving out some of those admin tasks that aren't all the time but need focused time. So this is something I'm, trying to loop in and making sure I have time for weekly check-in with the team, farm walk, um, that Friday afternoon test. So these are all kind of my afternoons, and that's how I'm like structuring my time. Yeah. So I don't know if this resonates for everybody, for people's type A versus non-type A personalities, but when something has someplace to go, then I don't have to be thinking of it somewhere else because I know it's going to be caught in one of these times. And so it helps with the brain bandwidth, which just to like let you ladies know, or anybody else that's watching this later, perimenopause and menopause is a very real thing that happens. And like our brains literally don't work the same way. And there's more and more fog and confusion. And it's like, I just can't think like I used to. And as I've learned more about perimenopause, I'm like, oh, that's like a real thing that nobody ever talks about. So, not to say we're any less capable or any of those things, but just accommodating for, yeah,
my
less
mom talks
multitasking.
about that brain fog a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is so helpful for me. I love, I'm a very visual person, so this is
Yeah.
helpful. And um, I think it's easy to feel overwhelmed when there's so many things to do, and a list, like a to-do list, just doesn't cut it sometimes
Yeah.
because then yeah, it just feels like you're constantly drowning in this list of things you're never getting to. And so having like protected time to do something,
Yeah.
like I was just saying to Greg today, because he's like, please remind me I have to fix these things and order these things. And I was like, I think you need like a block of time on the calendar that is just for you to like fix stuff
Mm,
that only you can fix or like whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's easy for it to not get done, but then it like affects, if
Yeah.
it's something like we need to
Yeah.
use, it affects our productivity. So it's like,
Yeah. That's like the, oh, what was somebody saying? It's like essentially, it's like, yeah, your tractor, you don't have to fix your tractor every week, but like when you got to fix your tractor, you got to fix your tractor.
yeah.
And like, having that contingency time booked in. And so, it's like, oh, if I have marketing planning here, but I don't always need it, now I'm all of a sudden, I'm like, now I'm trellising. And now all of a sudden it's become the trellising day, and then it's built into those systems. It's like, we just gotta check in every once in a while. It's why using these seasons to just check in and
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like people respond well to to consistency and a flow as well. Like everyone
yeah,
shows up Tuesday and they know it's transplanting Tuesdays or
yeah.
um and I find like comfort in knowing like, oh,
Mhm.
there's a flow. Like, yes, there's a million things to do this week, but I don't need to worry about the bed prep yet because we can do that Wednesday through Friday. And like right now, we'll just focus on like the planting and but also the panic that sometimes sets in when it like you don't get to everything that needs to get done, and then it
Yeah.
can mess up that schedule. And I think that's what I've like actively been thinking about recently is like, if the things I've assigned to certain days are getting moved or swapped, how much do I
Mm,
need to stress about that? Is it just because it's like not like what I've written out is essentially arbitrary? I mean, there is some like reasoning behind it, and you don't want it to be totally derailed. Um, but
right.
yeah.
I mean, that's a really important too. And like every person, it's like crop planning. It's like every person will think about it differently, like, a really good example from the before times early on was like sacrificing spring plantings to try and like get every dollar out of like the fall plantings, and so
Mm,
it's like instead of us taking the time, we're trying to spend all this extra time trying to get like one bunch off this like really pathetic bed. And it's like, okay, well, that one bunch takes us like 30 minutes to do because it's not a prime bed. And like our time would have better been spent to flip those beds. And so my farm teachers told me you become really good at triage as a farmer. So like a triage,
triage.
yeah, like a triage nurse. Like people come into the hospital and you're like, person that can't breathe, all right, we're gonna see you right now. Person with think they're sick and not sick, you get to wait 3 hours. Um, you like become really good at that chart. What's super urgent, and that's too when I was sharing with you the squeeze for the last one is like with my experience, it's like I need to have the harvest has to happen to make sales. Like that's like it's a non-negotiable. I don't ever not harvest. And I don't ever not like what are my other non-negotiables kind of thing. It's like Tuesday morning became sacred time. And like it's like we're not harvesting. If the harvest, it is important, but if it's gonna run over, sorry, we didn't get that harvest done and we need to adjust how much we offer people because it can't get in the way. We have to like work towards like right sizing things, because in farming we often see it's like all this stuff to harvest and nowhere to like sell it. So you really, it during COVID it happened a lot where it's like you just left the food to rot in the fields because it didn't make sense to spend the effort to like harvest it and have nowhere to
Yeah.
sell it, right? Um, and so as we like learn those things too, that's why I'm like, I would rather have the greenhouse seedlings there ready to go because at that baby, yes, I put time into seeding them and raising them, but like if push comes to shove, like I look at my greenhouse table and I'm like, I can only plant 3 of these 5 crops. Which of the ones am I going to cut? It's like I'm going to cut this one and this one because those are nice to have crops versus, you're like, what am I going to plant? You're like, I'm going to plant the broccoli, number one, because that gets me so many harvests. Everybody loves broccoli. The next one, definitely going to do, cauliflower, huge seller, and then maybe I'll wait on the chard, not everyone's favorite crop. That one I can let go kind of thing. So when we're doing our crop planning that we've done, we remember we overplanted and overestimated things. And so if you have a CSA, you planned for 9 items and you're hoping for 7 because in these moments you're deciding, actually, I'm going to cut that crop. Now, actually, I was really trying to push it on that shoulder season. So, I'm just going to skip this one. And in my monthly capture, I have that list and tracking like which crops did I just not prioritize? Which ones should I have prioritized? I was like, should have prioritized the Mother's Day sunflowers, tell you that, but glad I did prioritize the Cerinthy. So, and that squeezes to like trellising, weeding. It's like somebody can tell you some things are important, but until it's like, ooh, nope, should have lower trellis those mums because we lost a bunch, because they were wonky or, it was really hard to harvest. They say harvest is 50% of your time. And it's like, it was covered in weeds. I couldn't even harvest. Then you just kind of start to learn like, oh, okay, well, weeding this bed and this crop is more important than that one. And we just get to know these things as we evolve as farmers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and yeah, and I guess this brings up one of these tools. I haven't fully implemented it, but it's here if I ever want it. It's kind of this like crop tracking sheet with some of those things, to help me. I think for me, we talked about it in crop planning too, but like a lot of it stays in my head and like somehow just like stays there and I just like web it in. But now as I'm like getting older and things are changing, I'm like, no, I think this is going to become more important. So just a place for us to like track these thoughts, and especially if you're a learner that like I learn by writing, or you have team members and you want to empower them to like track like any other notes. Here's your time tracking thing with your carrots, Sienna, too, for the know your cost to grow, so you can actually have this be a thing and be like, oh, here it is, it actually took me 50 minutes to harvest 80 bunches, and you track that and you track it and you track it. And now you know those numbers so you can actually do the math. And so making record keeping kind of like a part of your schedule and your week is piece of it. So capturing this information. So this is a tool that has fallen in my not important, not urgent. And I think record keeping tends to fall in that not urgent, less important thing compared to everything else. So it often falls off of it. But, as we get better, it's not necessarily like, hey, we start with here. Maybe this is something we aspire to. I'm aspiring to it, right? So I get better at delegating and better at doing and being efficient. Now this can become more and more important. And so, and then this is the information that really is important. This is the information when we can say, hey, everyone, carrots actually cost this much and it costs everybody this much to make carrots. Like, stop fooling ourselves. Let's charge this much for carrots. It's just like, and they do this like, the ephemeral, like, when egg prices went up, when all the chickens started dying from that flu, that awful, like, there's so many of them that like kill all the chickens and kill all these animals. And so you have the middlemen, you have the producer, then you have the middleman and the buyer, right? And so this is like a common strategy where the farmer's like producing and like it costs this much to grow, something happens, there's a milk shortage, this happened in the 90s. The middlemen then raise the price in response because there's less supply, and so they can increase the price of, which just happened recently, eggs or milk. And now the customer, or avocados for crying out loud, why are they $2 each? You know, the cost gets adjusted to the consumer, and now the middleman is like, oh, now I'm getting this much money, and oh, the farmers now they're producing up again. There's more chickens, next round of chickens. We have abundance of avocados. The customer is still used to paying $2, and so even though there's like more supply, and the middlemen could reduce prices back down, they like they don't. They like keep them the same, and then instead of paying the farmers more, they just hold all that money themselves, which is why like food profits and you know or food co-ops are so important, and direct to consumer, just because that middleman, it's like an oldest game in the book probably.
Yeah.
Create a story to create scarcity, and then they raise prices, and yeah, so alternative to that, rather than creating a national like food scarcity sale scare, is to like have information and be powered with information. Like, no, this is the cost it is. I could go on and on. We're wanting to show too my copy of my field walk for anybody that needs that. I've made many iterations of this, and so for me, when I'm going out in the fields, this is how my brain is working on it. I start at the greenhouse tables and I look at those crops, as I told y'all, it's like, these are my high priority crops. Here's my medium low. If I can get to these, great, but I definitely need to make sure these ones happen. And so I'll prioritize those beds to get prepped. It's always nice for me to have a tally of like, oh, what are my beds space that is open and can be cleared and ready to plant in, and that all goes in the brain to figure out. This is your Greg part for repairs, right? Has his repairs log, and I separate next step on my projects. I used to call it big projects, but like, oh, I want to plant around the, workshop area. I can set that up. I want to move my header. They're like really important things that are like lower priority. And so I can like put them a small task. So I'm not going to say, I have to move the whole header line by, in 2 weeks. I'm going to say, okay, that's my project. And my next task is I'm going to go out and plan what parts I need for my irrigation. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to plan the next small step so I can chunk it, like Julie says. This is like a very Julie thing. She's like, you go there and you just chunk it. Now every task's in like 15-minute chunks. And so you can chip away at your big projects. Yeah. Oh, biodiversity notes. I always like that. I saw a snake, or we had this much water. So it's for our organic certification. I need a spot for that, but it's a fun one.
Oh, wow. I never think about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that would be really interesting for you, Sienna, too. It's like, I remember planting with Jenny, and she's like, there's nothing living here. She's like, oh my gosh, it's a roly-poly. It was like the one living creature in the soil. She's like, I know we don't want those, but at least it's alive.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're like all eagerly awaiting the day that we find our first earthworm.
Yeah, and then maintenance, I have all my maintenance tasks. Oops, that's going to go crazy. Maintenance, pests, monitoring, for priorities. Where do we need to be doing the pest control? Here's your testing the soil, and, having a spot to like ask ourselves these questions. So I like having the piece of paper, because then I can read this and be like, oh yeah, are the beds wet? I was just focusing on this whole huge problem we have with the fertility, as that's part of this prioritization piece, is like, we still need to see all the things. So yeah, that one's there. I should also put that management thing, my monthly capture thing, in here too, for the questions I ask myself every month. And maybe I'll get one for marketing too, when I do my marketing chunks. So yeah, those are just a couple tools I use, and I didn't take a picture of my whiteboard, but maybe I'll do that because it was from the Becoming the Employer of Choice course, and I liked the structure of it since I'm not somebody. It's hard for me to necessarily be like, okay, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. This is what I'm doing next week. Like I have a really hard time planning my weeks ahead. And so instead I kind of take this farm walk and I put it on the whiteboard and I only have one square that says it's like this is what's happening today and tomorrow, you know. And so and I'm only putting in that square is my like top two priorities because when you put that list of 15 things, it's like you're just never going to feel like you're doing anything, and even if you cross something off it doesn't feel great. And so it's like one of the best tools I've found is like I only put like three priorities on my day, like for my whole day for me personally. And if I get more done, awesome, you know, but otherwise three is reasonable. So that way at nighttime, you're not like, oh my God, I didn't do anything or I suck or, you know, it's like normally we're not like that, but if we're having an off day, we're hungry, it's August, you know, your mom just scolded you for not calling your grandma, you know, like you know, she's like in those moments, you're like, yeah, I just am horrible and I look at this long list I have, I'm just never gonna get done, you know. And find whatever we can to beat ourselves up. So it's just the top three. And it, you know, there is so much to do, but like the reality is it's like we're showing up the best we can every day. And we have to like believe in that. And things just have to fall away, you know, and consciously letting them fall away though, too. So if, you know, and that's it just circles back to this like what's our why for going in it. If like too many things are just like falling, it's like why are we doing this? You know, like we're not able to make money, things are just falling. Like I don't have the skills maybe to do this. It's like let it fall away kind of thing versus like how hard will you hold on to something? How much will you sacrifice? Like what is that boundary? And this just will finish us off in our just last few minutes here since is that Becoming the Employer of Choice course. I do highly recommend it. Here it is, Becoming the Employer of Choice. They're probably just wrapping up, but you might still be able to join it right now. They have another one called the Teams training that happens in the early spring. And so that's like another really good opportunity. So if you're not a farm owner, like this one is the Becoming the Employer choice more for the farm owner or like a high up manager that really has the agency to like direct the culture. The teams training is also really good. I sent JJ through it. You know, it still talks about like your leadership styles, communication strategies, how to overcome conflict. Um, like those are all just like really important pieces. And so when we are coming up, so just threading that like scarcity, things are falling apart, like I can't do all the things, everything's falling. You know, if you're a leader and an owner, like and things are falling, like the ripple effects of that are huge. Like if you can't, you know, fix that freaking hose that everybody uses every day and you haven't taught somebody else how to do that and that's on you and it's not happening, like that is a major thing to like check in with, you know, because the that how we manage ripples. And so we're human, imperfect humans, you know, we're trying and we're leveling up and all the times. And so this course just really helps think of, you know, who we are as people, how do we want to show up for our team so that we can really be like authentic for how that holds space. And so yeah, and I think we kind of like and then we kind of just like filter out in our like relationships or we find the people like that love to be the independent greenhouse person. And like that's our style. And we're just going to attract the people that love to be independent because I love to be independent and I really don't want to be that much of a leader. And, you know, but they're self starters. And so you're going to kind of attract that type of person and you create that culture. You know, if you want to be urgent chaos, like not have a plan, that's me sometimes. And definitely a former me. Like, I'm going to be burning out everybody around me. And, they're either going to be like jumping up and joining me in that hustle and then burning themselves out and having to leave. Or I can try and like become aware of my like urgency and like, I got to get this done by now. Maybe if I let that go, which I did last summer, I was like, oh, now I'm easier going. Oh, now it's easier for the people around me to be around me. Now they don't feel bad for asking me questions. And now I'm not coming into this problem anymore. And so, so much of this work is, learning for us how to like be a manager, be a boss, be a person, care for ourselves, find time for reflection. And I just think it's really, really important for us to like show up for ourselves because and we find workplaces that we'll constantly devalue ourselves because of this or this. We've come into these relationships over and over again in our life. And so I'm just trying to bring more awareness to it. And I think this course does a good job. The second one, which I don't know about, was hoping Michelle would be on the call because I know she's just finishing it as the employment resiliator. I think they focus more on the legalities of becoming an owner, which are legit. There's a lot of things to know, but then once you know them, you know them. So I don't think anybody should be intimidated necessarily. It's fair if you are intimidated. Yes, there's a lot to manage, and having to learn a whole new thing is a lot, but it's possible. And so, I didn't really have anything else much to talk about culture. We kind of talked about it at the early onset. I don't feel like I'm like in a space to really, really talk about it. But I do know like creating a safe place for people to learn and make mistakes, and the more and more I've done that are the more stronger relationships I have. And when I've been more like hard on people in particular and specific, that has built a person then out of like intimidation and like not necessarily great. So the more I can like show up kindly and compassionately is better for me. But and I model what other people do. If I never take a break, if I don't eat lunch and I'm working through lunch, that has its ripple effects. So making a point to take a break, go on vacations, not work weekends, helps set the tone for the rest of the team too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll leave it there, but I'm open to hear any of your closing thoughts on this all.
I just had a question on that you reminded me. Do you do like regularly scheduled check-ins, but not like a weekly check-in, but like a biannual or annual, like almost performance review, but also
Yes.
check-in slash pay situation?
Yeah.
I've been trying to think of that for our team.
Both of those courses, I think, talk about that. It's really important to have a place for it. So we did it 5 months into a new employees thing. Farm Lab will do it 3 months and 5 months, Hannah, I think. They do like a 3-month initial check-in because then, I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Well, or I was just saying, I think it's something like that. I think it's 3 months and 5 months because then after 5 months, you're like an official employee with this school.
Yeah, and then it's harder because that's a union job. It's harder to fire somebody or let somebody go. So that 3 months is like you check in with somebody. Hey, can you really improve in this or this way? Is this a good fit for you? You give them 2 months to like change. And if they haven't changed, then you can let them go at 5 months. Otherwise, you're kind of doing more things like, I did my evaluation with my past employee, and there was just like everything was great except like if this one thing could be improved, it would be really great. And I'm gonna just really set some clear guidelines on what I expect and how I want this to change. And like it was amazing. It changed. I was like, oh, this is like a non-issue now. It's just like was incredible. Everybody wants to do a good job, and so understanding what those expectations are, and having a place to like get raises is important too for folks. But yeah, there's like an entitlement that happens. Like, I've been here and I'm doing all this hard work. I need to get paid more. And you're like, dude, the reality of the world is just not that. It's, there's a cap on positions, and if you're already at that cap, then you're already at that cap kind of thing too. Yeah. And so that's where just that employment course, like it's very freeing. And then people get to sign up for that, they know that's the cap and they're joining in with that understanding. So it takes time to kind of build those structures to know that that's super important. Yeah. And yeah, there's maybe I'll drop it in too. There's this like, just because you're talking about that, there's this like motivational tool, motivational assessment activity. I can add it. I'm sure they'd be fine if I shared this. This is important too for like managers. It was a tool, one of the very instrumental tools I used to identify when someone on my team wasn't motivated anymore. You ask these questions about them, and you get a total score, and then it tells you like, your crew is highly motivated and ready to weed the carrots. That's hilarious. Nobody wants to weed the carrots. Yeah, pointing to your thing, Sienna. Widely known thing. Versus like, oh, there's significant problems. Or here you're in this middle piece where it's like, oh yeah, they're pretty motivated, but they'd do even better if, we gave more coaching. Because that's the number one default rule is like, if there's a problem with your team, it's like, it's the management. It's how you're managing. That's the default. It's never like, oh, this person just sucks. It's like, nope. That you as owners and managers, we have to like assume responsibility for everything. And so we're either not present with them enough, we didn't give them clear enough directions or guidelines. That's the default mindset. Yeah, and so this tool though really helps check in, I think, with where people are at. So I'll add a copy.
Yeah, this is cool.
I think that like self assessments are always really valuable too. I think I felt that on both like a manager side and an employee side, because I think as a manager, it's always really helpful. Like, I think there's a lot of like honesty that can come through in a self-assessment and getting to understand like where that person is coming from in if they're happy, if they're not happy, or like,
yeah.
And then I think even on the employee side, I think it's really good to like be made to kind of have that self-reflective time if you're not someone who's taking that for yourself already. So I've always found those really valuable, just like as a whole.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yep. And so that's part of that, the semi-annual reviews too. And so it's like I have the review I give that's their self-reflection, and then there's as a manager, my in-depth like scaling of questions. And so we went really into detail with this one. Put a lot of thought into it, and then during our like session, and then this is all like HR stuff. This is stuff you're supposed to have. There's just things you are like legally supposed to have, and pretty sure this is one of them. Like at least documentation that you had a meeting, and it happened on this date, and if there was any like I don't have it here, but they have the IDP's individual development plans. So if somebody is lacking, there's a plan and a strategy for how to get them up to that next level, and level them up. California is an at-will state though, so you can really just fire anybody when you want to. But in our handbook, we have that as a background, but our handbook says that we aren't at-will employers. that anybody who is falling short, will be given like a certain opportunity to like correct that and fix that. And that's why, this review thing, if somebody's here and they like need improvement and they didn't improve and they have an opportunity to improve, like
Yeah.
that's what it is. So um,
Well,
and then we just can like normalize, that's another part of culture. It's like normalizing, oh, that person just, that's who they always come in late. They always come in late. They always come in late, and now you've normalized it, and now they came in late for an important volunteer group that came in, and you didn't have their help when they needed it. That was another farmer's experience, being like, yep. And then that was okay. I let it go, but I shouldn't have. And so I just had to, normalized it for too long. So those are, yeah, I want to learn to be a good conflict mediator. And like, we all need to learn how to handle conflict better, I think, so that it's just a normal part of our thing and it's not a big deal and we don't take it personally. It's just part of it. Yeah, which is hard because we're all human beings living this imperfect existence with our own backpacks of bricks on our backs and wounds that we poke with each other. So it's not easy, but it's worthwhile. Yeah. I'm going to end the call here. Thanks, everyone. We can hang out, but I'm going to end the recording.